Hi, I'm Jonathan Reams, and welcome to Leadership in Creative Inquiry 1, otherwise known as Leadership and Opening Space.
Hi, and I'm Bonnie, and I'll be joining you and Jonathan as a co-teacher of the course.
So we thought with this little video we would try and introduce ourselves to all of you, since we understand that you guys have had a chance to get to know each other already and been through a number of courses together. So this is our way of introducing ourselves and our relationship to the topic a little bit, to give you a bit of context and background. So for myself, I started out this life as growing up on a pig farm. And that was my first experience of leadership, was chasing pigs around the field. And there's lots of things I learned from that. But we'll get into that's another story. Later on, I dropped out of college when I was 18, studying physics and philosophy at the University of British Columbia. And that was primarily because I had this inner kind of revelation and growing awareness that what I wanted from life was something more directly spiritual than analytical or rational. And that led to a lot of personal work over, well, decades now. And eventually it led me back to university, where I had this experience of a call to leadership, so to speak, in that the counselor at Gonzaga University, where I did my graduate work, mentioned that they had a new program in organizational leadership, and this booming voice in my head said, "Do that." And so I ended up in the field of leadership studies. And that lasted for about 7 years, a master's in organizational leadership and a PhD in leadership studies. And my focus was always on the intersection of consciousness research and leadership studies. And then about 7 years ago, I had an invitation to come and take a tenured position here in Norway at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, where I have a associate professor position in a master's in counseling program and also teaching in a master's in organizational leadership program. And the move to Norway has been very nice. It's a wonderful experience to have institutional support and a platform behind doing your work and the stability that gives. And so that's enough about me for now. What about you, Bonnie?
Well, you started off on a pig farm, and I found my way here at Alderlore, which is a horse farm. So there's a little overlap there. I live on this horse farm in Northwest Connecticut, United States, and we run a summer program here for young adults, and we also run what I call Alderlore Insight Center, which is a kind of casual think tank for people at post-formal stages of learning. When I graduated from college, I first started post-grad work in neuroscience, and I thought at the time I could slice my way through enough tissue to find consciousness. I mean, this was quite a long time ago. And the way it turned out, the way my mind operated, was I had too many philosophical questions for my scientific-oriented co-workers. So I left to work at a postgraduate level in philosophy. But I found that I had too scientific a orientation for most of the philosophers in my cohort. So for the most of my life, I've been an independent scholar, reading through all of Western and much of Eastern philosophy to find some piece of work that represented my own experience. And I realized that I had come to the point where I really need to try to represent my own experience in my own work and my own writing. So some of you may know me as an integral process philosopher. My full name is Bonnitta Roy. I have worked as an independent scholar, during that time, I worked in a long career, 33-year career, in the landscape design build firm, learned a lot about partnering and collaborating and competing and being a leader at many different levels of engagement. So I hope to draw on both the academic, intellectual, personal, and professional, and hopefully contribute some value to our experience here together.
Well, and if my experience is any measure of that, I'm sure it will be a good contribution. We first came across each other through the journal Integral Review, where Bonnie was invited in by another one of our original editors to participate in our merry little gang. And our first experience was Bonnie submitting her first paper on this process model of integral theory, and the rest of us, we looked at it and said, what do we do with this? And then I kind of jumped in, and I spent, I think, over 100 hours working with Bonnie on this paper as editor. And it was a real revelation to see the way in which she could name some of the subtle things that I had experienced and put a framework and understanding to them. So
Yeah.
I hope that can come in the course as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the students, all you listening out there, will find Jonathan is particularly helpful in asking the right questions and really kind of teasing out what's implicit or latent in our, let's say, our biggest expression that we haven't quite yet been able to make explicit. And so I know that he has done a lot of personal inquiry around providing exactly that role for people like us.
So we also thought that it might be useful for all of you to have some idea of our own kind of orientation to the subject matter of the course. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what has been my relationship to leadership and the concepts around leadership. And really, for me, that began with my dad. He was the president of the church council. He was the president of the British Columbia Pork Producers Association for 10 years, and just seemed to have a natural way of engaging people and gaining their trust and enabling them to work together for larger causes. And that I think was just something that was implicit in the environment I grew up in. And there was, for me, a lot of mentoring in terms of just how to work, how to learn how to clean the pig pens and do these kind of things in a way that continually got better. And so that orientation to continuous growth and learning came from that modeled experience. And early, when I dropped out of university the first time, well, no, I didn't drop out the second time. So just the time I dropped out of university, I was visiting with a friend, and he was telling this thing where he really was into Uri Geller and wanted the power to bend spoons like that. And I was 19, and I just suddenly blurted out, I wanted the power to raise consciousness. And I didn't really know what I was saying. It took me aback. But what it led to eventually when I went back to university 12 years later was this eventual linking together of consciousness studies research in a variety of domains, transpersonal psychology, cognitive development, and especially in adult late stage development, some neuroscience stuff, with the coursework I did in my PhD in leadership studies. And that led to a dissertation on the consciousness of transpersonal leadership. So that kind of gave me the background of the questions that have arisen for me, which has really been, how does the horizon of our awareness generate the kind of engagement we have with the world? How does what we can perceive influence how we act? And what happens when our horizon expands so far that it kind of goes beyond our sense of self and who we are and the ego, and we start to think that maybe there is some greater purpose and meaning to life, and how does leadership relate to that? So those are kind of the orientations I've had around the large question of leadership.
And that kind of builds on my little statement here, and that is around creative inquiry. And you all to know that I can be a provocative kind of person. I always like to get to, oh, but what haven't we thought of before? And what is possible that's not been possible before? And can we really work with emergent ideas? And I think this is the key to this is, creative inquiry. And I have a story that I like to tell, and I quite often tell stories around my experience with horses, and that is for a long time people had this theory that the way the horse herd worked was the stallion was the leader, and he was the dominant alpha. We've all heard these stories, but a research team in France worked on a project for many, many years, watching several interrelated families of horses in the wild that had been left in the wild. And what they saw was that the stallions were actually kind of bullies, and bullies pretty much hung out by themselves, and that the herd dynamics was held together by different classifications of mares, lead mares, helpful mares, aunties, and just general social mares, and that the situation was much more complex. The point here is that up until people changed the way they inquired about the herd, they could not even see those mares as having leadership roles, because the question itself was locked into, who's showing up as dominant, who's showing up in a certain way. And because they were locked at definition of leadership, it actually constrained what they could see. And so I think that this notion of creative inquiry is an essential piece in, it's the way leaders need to be inquiring creatively, because they're leading at an edge. So I'm really enthusiastic about this course, and I'm looking forward to meeting new friends and making new colleagues and exploring horizons where none of us have really been before.
And that's, the extent of my enthusiasm, as well as this opportunity really to do something new, to design a course in a new way. What I'm quite excited about is to take the opportunity to do something that was triggered by something I read that Paulo Freire did many years ago, which was design a whole graduate course around a 6-page essay by a peasant. And the people taking the course at first thought, well, this isn't academic, how can we? Oh. And by the end of the semester, they said they'd learned how to read. Yeah. And what I'm hoping is that by organizing the course around a single question and giving ourselves the space to go deep into that, we have the opportunity to really learn something new for all of us. So I'm very excited about the opportunity to participate with everyone and learn from all of you and with all of you. And we'll look forward to seeing you soon online.
Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.